little bit of background about today's meeting. Today's meeting, these slideshows were presented during the September 24th meeting in person at Idaho Elementary School. And so today is just the same exact slideshow, and it's an opportunity for individuals who were unable to attend that meeting to maybe sit in and attend the virtual meeting, as well as those who are unable to attend today's meeting to play back once we've transferred the recording over to our online website. All right. So a little bit into the agenda today. So we'll start with a welcome and an introduction. We'll recap what occurred during the previous meeting. We'll go over some community input that we've received so far. We'll go over the zoning proposal as it was presented during the September 24th date. And then we'll go into a Q&A and the next steps. We got a comment. Give me a second. Okay. All right. So before I get into and deeper into the presentation, I did want to update you all regarding some upcoming meetings. So today is English version of the virtual meeting. As I mentioned before, this is the exact same presentation as the September 24th date. And so that is the one we're on today. Tomorrow will be a Spanish only version for our Spanish speakers in the audience. And it will be the same exact slideshow, but it will be done by one of our Spanish speaking planners. And that will be tomorrow at the same time from 12 to 1. And that one will be done and hosted by Andrea Gills. Additionally, the next in-person meeting will be December 17th, 2024. That is next Tuesday, located at Sunset High School in the auditorium. And this meeting will be a more refined proposal based on some of the feedback we've gotten thus far. And we will look to incorporate any feedback that we received thus far into a refined proposal. And so that one will be in person at Sunset High School Auditorium. That is next Tuesday, December 17th, 2024, from 6 to 7:30. All right. So let me get into the overview of the. Sorry. So presentation overview, we'll go into the background of the authorized hearing. We'll go into the West Oak Cliff area plan overview, some of the existing conditions, the form district overview, the proposed zoning, and then what the next steps will be. Okay, so this authorized hearing, the Hampton-Clarendon authorized hearing, was initially approved in September 5th, 2019, through City Planning Commission. They initiated the zoning case to determine the proper zoning for an area generally alongside of Hampton Road between Burlington Boulevard and Brandon Street, along both sides of Clarendon Drive between Marlborough Avenue and the alley west of Hampton Road, containing approximately 17.45 acres. On January 19th, 2023, the City Planning Commission expanded those boundaries to include a northern portion located along both sides of Hampton Road between Wentworth Street to the north, Burlington Boulevard to the south, containing an additional 17.8 acres, bringing the total to approximately 35 acres of land within this authorized hearing area. So some background regarding the Hampton-Clarendon Corridor. It is situated at the heart of West Oak Cliff. The Hampton-Clarendon Corridor authorized hearing area encompasses a pivotal commercial node flanking both sides of Hampton Road and Clarendon Road. It spans approximately 35 acres. This area is home to a diverse array of small, locally owned businesses, including numerous auto repair shops, restaurants, as well as a larger format retailers, like gas stations, strip centers, restaurants. Although this area does have existing commercial uses, many have numerous vacancies as well as barriers such as zoning, which make current redevelopment or reinvestment difficult. Right? And so, sorry, let me go back. And so here is the authorized hearing process, as it's been mentioned today. So as of now, we've done the research, analysis, stakeholder engagement. We do that first. And then we've done our kickoff project meeting, which occurred back in April. We had our first community meeting back in July, which introduced the zoning concepts of form-based zoning, which is what we will be exploring. During our last meeting in September, we introduced the first initial zoning recommendations, and during the next one, we're going to introduce a more refined and see if we can reach some sort of zoning consensus based on feedback that we received from the community during that meeting, and that meeting will be December 17th. So we're going into the third meeting. So this plan, this authorized hearing is informed by the West Oak Cliff Area Plan. The authorized hearing is a part of the implementation of WOCAP, which was unanimously adopted by City Council on October 26, 2022. The West Oak Cliff Area Plan provides a long-range vision for land use, urban design, transportation, mobility, infrastructure, open space, and community concerns around gentrification, displacement, and revitalization. Additionally, the West Oak Cliff Area Plan identified several focus areas and included land use and zoning recommendations. During that process, there were extensive community engagement that occurred with over 7,500 touch points within the community. And among this included um, 844 total bilingual surveys which were completed and gathered. And so this was one of the highest engagement efforts collected by the city of Dallas in a long time during when it occurred. And so it was a lot of community engagement during that process. As I mentioned before, the West Oak Cliff area plan laid out focus areas, and the one that we're discussing today is the Hampton-Clarendon. Um, Many of you may be familiar with the Gemtown neighborhood and their authorized hearing, which was just approved at the Planning Commission, and it is moving on to City Council here soon. There's also the downtown Elmwood, which was completed and approved earlier this year, I believe. And then there's also the Cliff Neighborhood Center, the West Davis Corridor, Tyler Vernon Station area, and the Westmoreland Station area, which are also planning focus areas and areas of emphasis. Among the West Oak Cliff focus areas, there were 5 authorized hearings initiated. And as I mentioned before, the one we're here to discuss today is project number Z189349, and that's for the Hampton-Clarendon Corridor. The West Oak Cliff area plan vision for the commercial areas aims to establish commercial districts that are ideal for small businesses that serve people in the neighborhood and the greater Oak Cliff area. Encourage businesses that are compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. Encourage adaptive reuse and renovation of existing structures, and to implement traffic calming measures to make the district more walkable. So let's get into a little bit more specifics of the Hampton-Clarendon corridor. Here we have pictures of the Tom Thumb, which is located on the northern end of the corridor. We have a picture of Danny's Auto Service, which is located on Clarendon. And then we have a picture of Savita Health Center, which is located in a shopping center, which is also on the northern end of the corridor along Hampton. We have more photos of this building right here on Clarendon and Oak Cliff. Color Me Empowered, excuse me. And then we have a picture here of the Midway Auto Supply, which is directly on the corner of Hampton and Clarendon. We have another automobile use building here, and then we have um, a law office on Hampton, which is located here, a two-story law office. You see other buildings that are built to the street, which are occupied by service uses like barber shops. There's a medical chiropractor spot within over here, as well as a health clinic. And then on the right side, you have another shopping center. So, the existing zoning and land use within the Hampton-Clarendon corridor consists primarily of four base zoning districts. No, excuse me, five, but one of them is a parking district. But the four primary zoning districts are community retail district, which includes community servicing, retail, personal service, and office uses. This makes up the bulk of the properties within the corridor. There's a commercial service district, which includes commercial and businesses serving uses that mainly involve outside storage, service, and display. There are a few businesses that are zoned this. Then you have the mixed use district, which includes a moderate density retail, office, and/or multifamily residential use and accommodation on a single or continuous uh, building site, and that is located on the southern portion of Hampton. And then you have the regional retail district, which includes regional retail serving retail, personal service, and office uses, which is located on one parcel here on Hampton. So some of the current land uses within the area, um, staff found that there were 66 retail and personal service uses, which makes up approximately 38% of all total businesses within the area. There were 23 auto service related uses, um, which makes up 13.1%. As there were some commercial and business service uses, institutional and community service uses, office uses. There were a few single family homes here, some utility and public service uses, vacant buildings, and then there is a large portion of vacant lots within the corridor. So some of the West Oak Cliff area plans recommendations for this specific area. Um, calls to explore implementing the following recommendations. One of which is to amend the existing zoning to allow for a mixed-use development along Hampton Road between Wentworth and Brandon, and Clarendon between Hampton and Marlboro. Explore form-based zoning districts for walkable urban form, including activated facades and wide sidewalks. Promote pedestrian-oriented design, minimizing vehicular pedestrian conflict points, curb cuts, and parking locations. Explore prohibiting new drive-through establishments. Ensure proposed rezoning considers residential proximity slopes, setbacks, and landscaping to minimize impact on adjacent single-family properties, and to permit small multifamily developments, ideally 12 units or smaller, in townhomes within designated areas. So today, um, staff's recommendation is for a form-based zoning district for the district. Um, form-based zoning codes is a method of zoning where the code and the regulations focus more on the relationship between the building facade and the public realm, the form and mass of buildings relative to one another, and the scale and types of streets and blocks, as opposed to the segregation of land use, which is typically what you find in more Euclidean-based zoning districts. They typically aim to regulate the allowable uses, um, while the form-based codes emphasizes the compatibility of buildings with their surrounding, while letting a wider mix of actual activities locate within them. So here is a more detailed table of typically the differences between form-based and traditional zoning. As I mentioned before, traditional zoning focuses on more on how the buildings are used. It reserves each zone or designated area of land for a specific use. It's typically rigid and inflexible, and it regulates the use, density, and level of activity, while a form-based code focuses more on the form of the building than its function. and the zoning is typically based on context. It addresses unforeseen issues like design standards that traditional codes do not, and it affects everything from the character of the building to the size of the street it is on, and even the type and size of the signage. So these zoning recommendations today align with the West Oak Cliffs area plan's goal of transforming the node into a neighborhood scale mixed-use district that is pedestrian friendly. There is no minimum acreage required for the WMU zoning district, which is what we're recommending. WMU3 allows a variety of housing types, non-residential uses, and urban design standards to ensure the desired urban form with great consideration to the surrounding single-family uses within the area. So the form-based district for walkable mixed-use 3 allows specific development types. And those development types would be mixed-use shopfront, single-story shopfront, general commercial, apartment, townhome stacked, townhouse, manor house, civic buildings, and open space lots. So a little bit more details about the development types. The development types are aimed to dictate the building form and more predictable built environment, as well as facilitating more walkable public realm. And so some of the principal uses you typically find in these types of development types are office, retail, service and entertainment, commerce, fabrication, indoor fabrication, residential, civic, and places of worship. Um, Walkable mixed use 3 does not allow single family houses, any new single family houses. So here are some development types. As I mentioned before, you have a manor house, a mixed use shop front with the ground floor retail and residential above, a single story shop front, and then on the bottom here you have townhouse stacked. So some permitted uses within the walkable mixed use 3 district, and it was brought to my attention that this slideshow can be a little misleading, so it will be corrected during the December 17th meeting. But office, retail, service and entertainment, commerce, fabrication, residential, and civic uses within this category are all permitted, give or take a few that are permitted through a special use permit. And one which is has been highlighted a lot throughout the community is the drive-through facility. As I mentioned before, the West Oak Cliff Area Plan explicitly calls for prohibiting any new drive-through facilities, and this is one of those uses that will be required by SUP. What that typically means is that in order for a new drive-through facility to locate within the corridor based on the proposed zoning, they would have to apply for a special use permit and get approval from the CPC and City Council. And because the area plan explicitly states prohibiting drive-through facilities, it is unlikely that staff will recommend approval of such establishment should it come forward, should a new one come forward for an application. And so walkable mixed use 3 has natural protections to ensure that it's falling in line with some of the requirements and goals stated within the West Oak Cliff Area Plan. So next, I would like to get into a little bit about what we've heard based on some of the community meetings that we've had so far and some of the private discussions we've had with residents and business owners alike. There has been strong support for adaptive reuse of existing structures. Um, as many of you know, within this area, there are a lot of older buildings that are vacant, that are built closer to the street, and there has been great interest in adaptive reuse and seeing those buildings redesigned and brought up to more modern designs and standards for reuse. Additionally, there has been great concerns about minimizing displacement and gentrification and the negative externalities of certain new developments should they locate here. And so walkable mixed use aims to be sensitive to that while considering natural protections with regards to some height elements, some setback elements, and some parking elements. And I'll get into more specific details with that regards to this bulletin point a little bit later in the slideshow. There's also been growing interest and excitement for some of the proposals. There's been a strong support for improving walkability throughout the neighborhood. And then there's also been a parking issue that has been expressed by business owners who have, struggled to get new leases in because they don't have the adequate parking to support those. And form-based districts, our form-based code provides some relief to some parking challenges, and I'll get into that more specifically here in a second as well. We've also heard that the neighborhood is perfect the way it is. We do not want change. We've heard that there's strong support for protecting single-family neighborhoods. We've heard that people prefer an overlay to prevent townhomes within certain areas of the Hampton corridor. We've heard residents do not want multifamily housing and land developers in this area, but want affordable housing. And we've heard that people are optimistic about plans for walkability, water sidewalks, and multifamily developments in townhomes. They just want the development to be more aesthetically pleasing, which is a key focus of the form-based zoning code. And so we've also heard great concerns about the demolition of existing homes for multifamily townhomes, as well as new development causing more traffic and increasing property taxes, and then concerns about replatting into larger lots for missing middle housing, as well as concerns about this area turning into a second Bishop Arts. And this slide pretty much repeats some of the stuff I've mentioned before. There's a great concern about replacement of Hispanic cultures and Hispanic owned businesses within a corridor, as well as concerns about apartments and the type of people that they bring. And so we wanted to provide this slide during the last meeting to kind of show how staff makes our recommendations. Community input informs staff's recommendations as we prepare them for the City Planning Commission. City adopted plans also inform those recommendations. City policies and priorities, just natural planning, best planning practices, and then the overall public interest as it pertains to health and safety of the residents in and surrounding the authorized hearing area. Staff's recommendations are not about aesthetics. Um, they're about functionality, the viability of businesses, mobility and connectivity, safety, and explicitly the avoidance of most, if not all, of the existing businesses there through displacement. Our proposal, most of the businesses within the authorized hearing area would still be allowed by right based on what we're proposing. And so I'll get into that a little bit more here specifically as well. So I wanted to get into the first proposal. As a reminder, this slideshow was presented originally during the September 24th. So this proposal may be familiar to some of you all. This is the same exact proposal. We haven't changed it. And pending the results of some of these two meetings today and tomorrow, we could present a new draft during the 17th meeting. So during the last meeting, we showed a rezoning on Clarendon between Hollywood and Marlboro to walkable mixed use 3 from the community retail and community service uses that were located here along Hampton Road, from Burlington all the way down south to Emmett. Um, we've presented walkable mixed use 3 as the base zoning district for every property there, with a shopfront overlay centered around the intersection and some of the older buildings that have historically been retail and that are already built to the street. And the idea behind the shopfront overlay within this specific area is the shopfront overlay ensures that this entire area primarily remains retail, since most of the building, all of the buildings within this area are retail, and historically they've always been retail within this centralized area. And so the community expressed desire to want to keep this specific pocket retail, and so we're proposing shopfront overlay here. Additionally, we proposed walkable mixed use 3 for the properties from Burlington North to 12th Street. Additionally, we proposed walkable mixed use 3 for the property at the north west corner of um, 12th Street as well. And if you notice, there's a three large parcels here, one of which is uh, proposed to be community retail, and the other is a PD for a planned development. We're proposing to leave these as is, because these are the deepest lots within the corridor, and the community has explicitly expressed the desire to have smaller scale multifamily products here if they were to come. And given that these lots are deeper, there would be staff found that it would be a little bit more difficult to control density on lots with larger depths, because you have greater flexibility with regards to the height, and so you're more able to stack more units on a higher floor. And so I'll get into more details about what that means as it pertains to the residential proximity slope here shortly and how that works. But that explains why we left these three properties as is. The lots are a little too deep for the natural controls of the walkable mixed use 3 to work the way the West Oak Cliff area plan intends. So some of the development standards that I wanted to get into today, I wanted to highlight the setbacks. So the setbacks for the walkable mixed use 3 would require front yards to be between 5 and 15 feet minimum max. The side and rear yards would be 5 feet, 10 feet if it's abutting a residential district, along with some natural landscaping buffers. There would be a lot coverage of approximately 100 to 60%, depending on the development type. And the lot coverage of a 100% is a little bit misleading. You have to factor in the setback requirements as well. So it's more like, depending on the context, it could be anywhere from like 95 to 85% if you wanted to achieve maximum coverage, but considering the rear and front setback. The max height lowers from the 54 feet, 4 stories allowed in the community retail districts to 50 feet, 3.5 stories. Height bonuses may be provided for mixed income housing development bonuses. And then, of course, as similar to the base zoning district, there is a residential proximity slope of 3 to 1. And what the residential proximity slope means is um, once you've reached the rear yard setback, for every foot you go up, you have to be set back an additional 3 feet from the boundary line of that residential property. The landscaping requirements fall in line with what's in the standard zoning ordinance, Article 10. The open space requirements requires at least 8% of net land area of a site must be provided as open space compared to none within the base zoning districts. And then, of course, screening has to occur of all HVAC equipment, mechanical devices, and dumpsters must be screened from view from all adjacent streets and properties. Here we have a comparative table between the existing base zoning, which is primarily CR, and the walkable mixed use 3 district. As mentioned before, I wanted to go into a little bit more details regarding the residential proximity slope. Under the existing zoning, CR, um, primarily CR, and all of existing zonings, buildings can be constructed as high as 54 feet or 4 stories, but adjacent residences are protected at a 3-to-1 residential proximity slope. The same would be true for the walkable mixed use 3, except your maximum height will be lowered to 50 feet or 3.5 stories, and the residential proximity slope would also kick in then. And so this limits the height of buildings to no more than 3 stories. And the reason this is important specifically within this area when discussing density, as I mentioned before, the depth of the lots ranges from 60 feet to approximately 165, 70 feet for most of the lots that are proposed to be zoned walkable mixed use 3. And in order for that third story to appear, that building has to be set back. Um, I believe it's 95 feet, but hold on, let me times 105 feet. So in order for the third story to appear, a building has to be set back from the residential property 105 feet. All right. So I want to give you more details regarding the shopfront overlay. The shopfront overlay is intended to create a pedestrian shopping street frontages with development types that support active uses. As I mentioned before, specifically on the corner of Hampton and Clarendon, um, that area is primarily retail, and it historically it's always been retail, and so the community expressed desire to keep it that way. And so what the shopfront overlay does is it keeps that area as a pedestrian shopping street frontage. And so the shopfront overlay may be applied over any walkable mixed use area, and it is intended to accommodate a limited set of development types. So unlike the base zoning district of walkable mixed use 3, which supports most of the development types except for single family home, the shopfront overlay primarily supports two, I believe. And I think I have a slideshow next showing those. Um, Wherever a shopfront overlay designation is applied, the standards for a mixed use or shopfront development type. So those are the two: mixed use or single story shopfront development types shall apply to the first 30 feet of the building measured inward from the street facing facade. What that means is for the first 30 feet inward, you have to apply the standards of the mixed use or the single story shopfront development type. After that, then the other development types could begin to appear. Any street designated with an single shopfront overlay is a primary street. The boundaries are not required to follow lot lines or match parcel boundaries. So another important aspect of form-based codes is the public realm enhancements that typically follow with it. So changing zoning from CR, CS, regional retail, to walkable mixed use 3 form district could result in a parking reduction for some uses. It also reconfigures and redesigns the public right of way to provide additional on street parking by providing wider sidewalks, which can be used to meet some of the permitting requirements. It's intended to provide traffic calming, sidewalk enhancements, service parking in the back to kind of limit some of those curb cuts up front, as well as potential art opportunities. So, if this proposal were to go through, I wanted to provide some context with regards to non-conforming structures. Um, Per the code, if a structure becomes non-conforming with the zoning change, existing structures are not required to conform retroactively unless major renovations are made to the buildings. Per our code, a major renovation means that a building permit or a series of building permits for the reconstruction, alteration, or modification of a building that increases the floor area by at least 35%. Total additions to existing non-conforming structures less than or equal to 35% of the original floor area existing as a date of passage must comply with the use and placement requirements and height and element requirements. So basically what that means is upon the date of passage of the new zoning, you will be able to expand your building up to 35% um, of the original floor area, but you must comply with the use and placement requirements and the height elements for whatever development type um, your building closest meets. Right. And so we've reached the section of the presentation where I opened the floor up to um, questions and answers. At this moment, I would like to ask anyone who has a question to raise their hand, and I will unmute them and allow you to speak and ask your question. Mm, Let me expand the window. See, does anyone have their hand raised? Hey, Shalonda, can you see if anyone has their hand raised? I'm not seeing it on my screen.
Yeah, Violetta has the hands right.
Okay, okay. All right. All right, Miss All right, Miss Violetta, you're unmuted, I believe. How about this? Hello? Sorry, we're having technical difficulties. Hey, Shalonda, could you help me just mute everyone? I mean, unmute everyone.
I think now I unmute.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, I have just a question, a couple of questions, and maybe a
Mhm,
comment. The first question is: I know the 3 stories limit with the this, but it is possible that developers or builders can ask for an exemption for the 3 stories, like for example with the board of adjustments, or
mhm,
through other ways to do it.
mhm. So, in order for someone to request um, additional height, they would have to request a variance and prove hardship. And yes, that would go to the Board of Adjustments, or they would have to request a zoning change, and that would go through the Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay, that's the first question. And the second question is, it has the city performed some kind of formal and independent racial and community impact analysis and how these changes can impact the community, not only having businesses there, but
Mm,
also the community living around that. Because of course, if we see like high price multifamilies are built there in the
mhm,
future, that can lead to increase in taxes, or
mhm,
a real change in the fabric of the community that lives there, and that of course can displace in the future. We know that this doesn't happen in 1 year or 2 years, but this is something that can happen. Is the city has an analysis like that? Because other cities like New York, some areas of New York, some areas in Florida,
mhm,
when they change to the Euclided, I can pronounce it well, the eclectic for zoning to the base form-based zoning, they do perform this type of analysis, independent of the city, and it's a formal analysis that exists.
So, There isn't a more specific formal analysis that has occurred. We typically rely on our market value analysis tool that we have here with the city, which kind of helps us identify areas that would be of great risk of displacement. And we typically reference that when writing our recommendations in our staff reports before we submitted it to CPC and City Council. But I can check around, especially with our economic development team, just to see if there are any tools or any more um, specifically specific analysis that would be that could be done with regards to a foreign-based district within this specific area. I can check on that. Yes.
And I also have this is not a question, it's more like a comment.
Okay.
Just want to make a note regarding walk-up because you always, and everybody will always mention walk-up. Walk-up was passed by the CPC and the City Council, and I attend many of these meetings for walk-up, so I know how the meetings work. And one of the things that they mention all the time is improvement in infrastructure, sidewalks, traffic, et cetera, walkability, all these kind of things. However, um, uh, directly, the zoning changes don't bring the funding and don't guarantee the improvements in infrastructure. So I think this is a little bit misleading that this will bring directly infrastructure improvements in that area. I just want to make that comment.
Yes, ma'am. Um, the idea behind the form base and how it ties into the infrastructure improvements, more so relates to the built environment, the open space and landscape requirements and the facade and the building structural design elements and how that facilitates and leads into more improvements. Um, I believe that our transportation department is um, finalizing their transportation study for the Clarendon area with regards to some street improvements along Clarendon. Um, but I hear your feedback and um, I'll make mention of it and I'll see if we can try to address it more specifically during the 17th meeting.
Okay, thank you, JP.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have, I believe, Yolanda, Miss Yolanda.
JP, if you don't mind, can I make a comment on one
Go
of
ahead.
the questions that Violetta did ask?
Okay.
JP?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, Violetta, thank you for the question that you asked about the potential impact of rezoning an area into a form-based district. I don't know if you're aware, but there's an analysis that have been done independently, citywide, to look at the displacement risk of a lot of areas in the cities, including West Oakcliff area and the Oakcliff area. And that was done by Builders of Hope. They hired a consultant to analyze the entire city. Our staff is aware of that study and we factored in making our zoning recommendation. So a lot of the recommendations that we do make, we are required to look at different policies and policy documents and reports that exist, either whether the city is involved in it or where there's some kind of consensus of the city that they're credible enough to be factored in making zoning and policy recommendations. So we are looking at the displacement risk factor and the potential impact that the zoning change might have in a neighborhood as part of that. That's all I wanted to say.
All right. Miss Yolanda.
Yeah, hi there.
All right.
Thank you for taking my question. I had also messaged it in when I registered, but it's if you go back to the slide about where you talked about if you have a shop front overlay, you can't use the first 30 feet of your property.
Right.
So I just, I guess I just need a little understanding. So if an area, say, I also sent you a question about whether we could extend shop front overlay to the Clarendon Street, if that was potential. So let's just say we're looking at one of those auto shops on Clarendon. if a shopfront overlay is placed in that area with the WMU3, would there be any immediate impacts to those businesses? And would they have to then somehow restrict what happens in the 30 feet?
No. Those businesses would be grandfathered in. But let's say a new auto related business would like to come in. As you're aware, a lot of those lots on Clarendon don't have that much depth. And so it could pose significant risk to new auto shops coming in um, um, to achieve that first 30 feet of office and then the auto in the back of the
Right.
lot.
Yes. So the lots potentially wouldn't be deep enough for that
Correct.
to be possible. If you don't put a shopfront overlay, it doesn't have that same restriction. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
However, then those properties could become living spaces.
Correct.
I think I do have another question.
Okay.
And thank you for that. That helps me. I've done zoning 101, I think 10 times, and I almost got it. But we were in a meeting yesterday at City Council regarding an authorized hearing for the Floral Farms area.
Right.
That authorized hearing was postponed until February. Are you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was related to a House bill and some clarification about non-conforming uses.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that issue also relevant here? Are there non-conforming uses that are somehow going to be clarified or impacted based on how the city addresses that House bill?
So, as I mentioned during some of the prior meetings, the only three businesses that would um, would become at risk of becoming non-conforming, not being kicked out, but becoming non-conforming, would be two drive-through businesses and then one telecommunications tower. And the reason being is because all of them require a SUP. So technically, there is an option for them to be allowed through CPC and city council approval, but because they require an SUP and they don't have one right now, then we would have to send them a 929 notice.
Right. But right now in the area that we're talking about, there are businesses that may already be currently non-conforming and or with the change in the zoning to WMU3 with or without shopfront overlay would be at risk at becoming non-conforming. Isn't
Yes,
that correct?
yes, three
So,
businesses. Are you thinking of any other businesses?
oh yeah, like aren't a lot of our car shops already non-conforming and or wouldn't they become non-conforming?
No, no.
Okay.
Auto service uses are allowed by right within walkable mixed use theory.
Right, but we've also talked about their proximity, that they're non-conforming for other reasons in terms of their proximity to
Structurally,
structurally.
but yes, structurally. This decision, specifically SB 929 only, is only in regards to use conformance, not structural conformance.
Okay. Hey, that was awesome. Thank you, Jalen.
All right. All right. Next we have Miss Jennifer Rangel. Hello. She unmuted. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't allowed to mute. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. Pertaining to Seth's comment about Builders of Hope displacement toolkit that they published, some of us, are aware and have tuned in to Stephanie's presentation. Their analysis looked at this at the citywide level, but I believe what Violeta was also trying to advocate for, it's like independent analysis in-house uh, by the city. Like when there are zoning recommendations, at times there is a environmental impact study assessment done to understand the effects of the development. And so similarly, other scholars and like for example, Dr. Lance Freeman, they do a racial equity impact analysis that looks at very specific assessment indicators looking at specific developments. And so while it's great, and I really do also appreciate Builders of Hope analysis, because I think it does beg to the big citywide issues of displacement by different communities. In this case, it's also important to kind of look at this area through those lens of a racial equity impact analysis. Granted, I'm also aware about the market value analysis, which does have some blind spots when looking at it from a racial equity lens. And so I would encourage staff to also incorporate that type of assessment when doing these recommendations, given the sensitivity of the area for displacement. And happy to follow up with resources as well.
Thank you for that, Jennifer, and I would greatly appreciate those resources if you would be willing to share. I believe you have my email. Just shoot me links, and I'll be sure to check them out.
And if I may just add, so Jennifer, I think the issue that we run into is that zoning does not necessarily mean that development is happening. If we had a specific development that was coming in the pipeline, then that analysis would be helpful. But right now, what we are changing is just the rules, the guidance for development. And because we don't know any of those development types that, Jalen went through could come anywhere. So it's very difficult for somebody to do an objective analysis for the potential impact of development when you don't know what is going where. So zoning per se is about rules that guide development. But when the actual development is happening, that is when you do an assessment of the potential impact of that specific development on the community. That's when it makes sense. So for right now, I think I do understand your point, and it makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate what you're saying. And if there is a developer or some independent organization that has a project in the pipeline and they want to know how it might impact the community as a result of that development happening in the corridor, we'd be happy to work with them. But because we don't know what might happen in future, it's very hard for us to do that type of assessment.
All right, Miss Elena Stevens. Miss Elena? Elena, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
No, you said my name right. Thank you.
Okay.
I was concerned. You're talking about traffic calming measures.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking specifically down Hampton, the Hampton part of this. Depending, as Seth just mentioned, what developers decide to put on this WMU walkable mixed use developments, how much information are we going to have as neighbors as far as like the transportation study and the traffic study? Because as we all know, Hampton gets kind of congested at certain parts of the day, particularly.
Yes.
So what is going to happen on that? And yes, we do want traffic calming, but we don't want huge traffic jams either. We live in Oak Cliff, not North Dallas.
Right.
Oh, and can I ask, and number two, Seth mentioned a study that had been, I guess, the city-wide study. Is there any way that I can get a hold of that? I'm just curious about it.
With regards to transportation?
No, I don't think it was transportation. It was may have been. No, it was infrastructure, I think.
Okay.
Builders of Hope did a study. So if you can contact Jalen, I think he's going to give you his email at the end.
Okay.
We can be able to follow with them and see if we can send you a link to that report.
Okay. And
it wasn't done by the city, somewhere on their website, and we can.
So it's on the city website somewhere.
Okay.
Yes. Specifically with regards to your first question, regarding Hampton,
Yeah.
We've discussed the zoning proposal with our transportation department, and we've asked them to look at it from a traffic impact standpoint. And there has been the feedback we've gotten is they like the plan as it pertains to traffic calming. not just from the form base and the design elements, but because the plan calls for the introduction of more residential uses, which typically are less traffic generators than more retail oriented uses. And so um, I'm not sure what they have in the pipeline specifically for Hampton. I do know that they're working on the completion of the Clarendon corridor, but I can follow up and try to provide you a more specific answer for Hampton and how if a new application or a new property were to be developed, what would be the traffic impact analysis that occurs throughout that process? I can get more information on you with regards to that and how the community can stay informed during that process.
If we're informed, are we going to be able to help make changes once, say this zoning thing, this current zoning proposal passes?
So it depends on
how much input are we going to have at that point?
so
Transportation.
some input that you could have is similar to the way that the authorized hearing for these West Oak Cliff areas were started. You can raise great issues with regards to transportation and the negative impacts that development trends has created within an area. And what can occur is your council member at the time, whoever he or she may be, can decide to initiate another authorized hearing, and we can make further adjustments to the zoning or land use within the area and kind of work it through that way.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Jennifer, I believe you had another question. Or no, Miss Elaine. Oh no, Jennifer, sorry. Did she hop off? Okay, Miss Yolanda, did you have a question? Oh, hold on. Let me unmute Jennifer. Sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. It was just a response to Seth. I do believe there are some scenario planning visualizations that could happen and analysis. So that was my only comment, is that it might not be like a zoning case in front of us today, but there is still opportunities to explore potential changes that could come through. That was my only thing. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Miss Yolanda.
Hi there. No, I think I'm okay. There were some questions going on in the chat, and I just wanted to remind you to take a look, but Seth explained that you guys are going to address those later.
Okay. And Miss Yolanda, while I have you on, you mentioned the shopfront overlay on Clarendon. Have you had a chance to run that by the Automotive Association within the area? Hello? I'm sorry. I'm gonna unmute you. Sorry. Let me see. All right, try now.
Yeah, that's cool. I hung up before too quickly. I have introduced the idea, and that was the reason for my specific questions. And so
Okay.
I would imagine we'll get some feedback
Okay.
in the between now and tomorrow in the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Before we end, because we are at the stopping point for the meeting, do we have any more questions? Well, no, we're not. We have 30 minutes. Do we have any more questions?
There are questions in the chat room.
Okay, yeah, let me work through those then. Will the meeting be recorded and available for people who can't join? This was asked by Ms. Violetta. Yes, ma'am. This meeting will be recorded. Mr. Joe Barton asks, would the passing of this zoning change supersede the current zoning of any particular tract? Yes. This would be the new zoning. From Mrs. Andrea Ramirez. I believe there was an analysis done during the pandemic about the impact on the community about another area, and it was negative. So I know it can be done. All right. Ms. Ramirez also asks, how can we see the analysis that was done on the impact in this area? I believe that Seth made mention of that, and we'll work on trying to um, provide that to you. Ms. Ramirez, could you shoot me an email? My email is on the screen so that I can be sure to follow up with you requesting that information. Right. And Hampton is Ms. Ramirez also stated that Hampton is mainly used as a thoroughfare for people going to work daily. It's their way out of Oak Cliff. It's important. That's not impacted. All right. Right. And I believe most of these questions have been answered and addressed that I'm seeing on the screen. All right. So if there are no more questions, Ms. Yolanda, your hand is raised again. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clarification. Let me see here. Oh, so clarification, exactly the name of the report that Seth is referring to.
mhm.
And then to get clarification from Ms. Ramirez about the name of the report. Oh, there she go. No, the name. Okay, thank you. So Seth is referring to the anti-displacement toolkit. And then I was trying to get clarification if Ms. Ramirez is talking about that report or talking about another report that was done during the pandemic. And if it was done during the pandemic, then what is the name of it so that we can then see if we can get access to it? So I don't know if she can unmute.
Yeah. Ms. Ramirez, would you be comfortable unmuting? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she's
Yeah.
saying.
All right, here we go. I just requested it.
Hello, can you hear
Hey,
me?
yes, ma'am.
Hi. Yeah, so when we had these meetings before, I
Mm,
know we had a couple at Martin Wees Park
mhm,
that were done about this thing. I went to multiple, and there was a report done, and I don't remember the name of the report, Yolanda, but I know it was done specifically regarding West Oak Cliff in that area, Westmoreland, Illinois, Cocker Hill, Davis, that whole area. And I swear I remember them saying that it was going to be a negative impact on that community. I just don't remember the name of the report and who was in charge at that time because my brain is
That's
not
okay.
working.
But
But it's got to be there. There's got
do
to
you
be
know if it
one.
was it a city report? Do you
It
know?
was a city report. It was just like we had the same type of meetings. It was so whoever was in charge, I think I can't remember the name of the people that were in charge back then, or if it's the same people, but there was, I mean, obviously you guys would know if there was a report done.
Was that done by the planning department? Was it
I'm pretty
transportation?
sure it was the planning department. It was, they had, you know, we went down to Wees Park and they had like all these like boards up with all the plan out. And then I think that's when they mentioned that they were doing the report.
mm.
Or it was a meeting over the phone. I went to a lot of meetings back then, and I'm sorry, I'm confused a little bit, but I do remember that. Do you remember that, Yolanda?
Yeah, I appreciate your feedback. I was just trying to see if I could figure out what it was. But yeah, that was the WOCAP planning process.
Whoa, Cap.
And
Yeah,
they did release a report and Jalen did reference it. And
Is that the same one?
yeah, and I don't know that that's one that had necessarily, it might have had some pros and cons, but yeah, I mean, that's what we were doing during that time. But
I do remember there was one that was like it was negatively impact that area, and I thought they weren't going to mess with that part of town.
oh well, that's what. Yeah, I'm sorry, not to. We don't want to detract, but yeah, what happened is there were no recommendations in WOCAP for that area.
Okay.
From Hampton to Westmoreland.
Mhm.
Mhm.
and Cockrell Hill to whatever.
So my
and that was
question is there
and that
one,
was because
but is there one being done like that for this area? I guess that's my question.
yeah, this area is part of the West Oak Cliff area plan.
Okay, then that,
And
okay.
this was recommended by the West Oak Cliff area plan. And the
Based
only
on
difference
that
is,
analysis, right?
yeah, and then based on the advocacy of the community, there were no specific recommendations made for that area west of Hampton because of the lack of community engagement and participation.
Okay, so then the
thank
lady
you.
that asked the question before, when I guess maybe 15 minutes ago, about an analysis, is that
Mm.
she talking about something different?
I believe she's talking more specifically about transportation and the
Oh,
impacts
No.
with regards to
No.
introducing new uses within the area.
That was Elena, and then Violetta was talking about an equity study. I
equity,
believe.
that's
Yes.
what, yeah.
So, and that is the one that Steph responded to with the Builders of Hope.
Okay.
And just to make a point that anti-displacement toolkit does not address Oak Cliff specifically. It was
Got it.
actually 3 other areas of Dallas. So again,
Got it.
the request is, can't these processes include some sort of equity assessment
That's
to
right. Yeah.
or a scenario planning to be able to, again, in keeping with the racial equity plan, Jalen, to try to, understand what the impacts might be. And I appreciate, I'm going to go on mute now, but thank you for allowing us to get that clarification. I think it just avoids.
Well, that helped me too, because I was a little bit confused. Sorry. Thank you.
I think I'm glad we had the time because it avoids the miss, that then we're missing, we don't all
Right.
are on the same page. So I'm glad that we were able
Right.
to talk through that.
All
And
right.
I think based on what Jalen was saying, we paid attention to a lot of the issues that you are alluding to. One of the things that we made sure was that we try to keep the businesses that are there from being displaced. That was intentional. We are also trying to protect the existing character, so we are not coming there to recommend 20-floor-story buildings. We are making sure that whatever staff is proposing is consistent with what the community said in the plan. So that's how we pay attention to this.
I guess I don't know who it was, but I think the impact on the people maybe who live around that street are probably going to be impacted. And how is that going to impact them with taxes and, just being displaced? That's my concern.
Okay.
More so than the businesses.
I do understand. I wish I knew what is coming where, at this point. But, then we can be able to tell precisely how it might impact the community. But what zoning does, it just sets the standard, the guidelines for development.
Right.
It can't really tell you what exactly is going to come there.
And
Well,
it's even more difficult to do with a form-based district.
You kind of just know, right? Like, you've seen it done in other areas and neighborhoods. It's not hard to figure out what's going to happen.
When the developers more likely to do this because when they have a project, they know what is coming and they know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I'm not so much worried about developers as I am about the people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods.
All right. Ms. Rangel.
So today's meeting was scheduled for 1 hour and 30 minutes, but tomorrow's Spanish only meeting was cut by 30 minutes. Could you all expand on why that decision was made, and if the community needs 30 more minutes, will that be allocated just like the English webinar?
So the difference is I tend to talk a lot slower, and I'm a lot more loquacious. And so realistically, I could have done this meeting in an hour, but I know how I talk, so I wanted to give myself more time because I was doing today's presentation and Andrea is doing tomorrow's. But I'm sure that if we go over time tomorrow, we can make accommodations for the Spanish speakers.
I just don't know what Andrea's schedule look like.
Right.
He's more busy than we are. So maybe she scheduled it for 1 hour based off, her calendar. But I think in terms of maybe what we can do, if there are people who are bilingual and want to ask follow-up questions, they can maybe speak to you and you translate for us, and we might be able to respond to the question if Andrea leaves, after 1 hour. We can stay longer than.
We have Steph, we have another Spanish speaker in the office that
Okay. Yeah, so we can accommodate you then.
Miss Yolanda.
Oh, I'm sorry that my hand is still up. I will say
Okay.
I was trying to type it in the thingy. I think I do recognize, and I want to just say it out loud, is that I do recognize that that you guys have tried to use minimum zoning, like the minimum impact, right? And with the opportunity to not have, again, I think when we look at zoning, everybody looks at what happened in Bishop Arts and just thinks that that's going to happen unilaterally. And I think after taking a look at what you're proposing is that that's not what you're proposing. I mean, not that that might be the outcome 15 years from now or 20 years from now with future zoning changes.
Right.
But I recognize that these current zoning changes are the minimum impact. And so I just want to say that out loud and acknowledge that, like, I see it. I see that over the course of the last few years. While we have a long way to go, I can see that there's been a shift in sort of efforts to hear and reflect community will. So I want to
Gotcha.
say thank you.
Thank you, Miss Yolanda. It's important that we acknowledge that as planners within the city of Dallas. Bishop Arts, just historically, was where it is today, and where it came from is a very sharp contrast. And we believe that our proposal is more of a softer kind of landing as it pertains to progress, ensuring more walkability, and also ensuring that existing businesses just are able to kind of stay in place and continue operating. And so I appreciate those words. And hopefully, as we continue to move forward throughout this process, we can reach a point of compromise among all parties. And last question, Ms. Rangel. I'm sorry, my computer is about to die, so go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I had to switch to my coworker's computer. My computer died. Question, Ms. Rangel.
I forgot to put the hand down. All good. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. I want to thank you all for attending today's meeting. Hopefully all of your questions were answered. If you think of any questions that we weren't able to answer, my email is on screen. I would like to ask that you shoot me an email personally so that I can get back with you. Once again, tomorrow's meeting is at 12 o'clock from 12 to 1. It will be a Spanish only meeting. And then the following Tuesday, December 17th, will be our next in-person meeting. It will be from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Sunset High School. Um, and Spanish translation services will be made available there as well. Um, it, Thank you all once again for.
JP, I do
Go ahead.
have an announcement if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I know most of the speakers, the attendees here are our community partners. I think we work on other authorized hearings in West Oakland. So I just wanted to make a couple of announcements of some of the critical items that are coming up. So we do have Jimtown neighborhood
Right.
rezoning that just passed through the CPC. That is going to be going to the city council on January the 22nd. So we are working towards scheduling that to go to the city council for another public hearing. Hopefully that's going to be the final one. So for anybody who is interested and is following that, that's going to be going to the city council hearing on January 22nd. And then there is the North Cliff Neighborhood Center. That is case number Z189-129. That was led by Megan Wimmer. That we are scheduling for CPC hearing on January the 23rd. So those are the two important timelines that we are working towards. And I hope that, for some of you who have been involved with this, you can come and participate and, provide your comments or just show support or opposition. Just wanted to let you know about those two timelines.
All right. I think I'll allow Yolanda and Miss Elena to ask their questions, and then we'll hop off. All right, Miss Elena.
Okay, my question is, at the in-person meeting, will changes made, changes suggested today and tomorrow be included in the presentation you give next week? So is the presentation that you do next week, is it going to be different than what we saw today?
It may or may not be.
Maybe. Okay. All right.
Based on my meeting notes that I received today, I was asked to explore shopfront overlays along Clarendon, and so that will be a point of discussion on Tuesday's meeting.
Perfect.
And then I've also been in communications with some groups concerned about a proposed car wash. And so we're going to maybe explore um, some changes within that area if they're necessary. But so far, a lot of the feedback I've heard has kind of been consistent. So there is a chance that the proposal could be the same, but we still have tomorrow's meeting
Right.
to kind of hash out some more nuances with regards to the proposal. So there is a chance, not necessarily sure just yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and Miss Yolanda.
Thank you. Well, two things. One, just in full transparency, because, to say it out loud before this meeting, there was communications from the community that this came about very quick, these last 3 meetings. And there was a request that we move this to the new year so that so that people aren't not missing this, like, through the cracks with the holidays and things coming up. So my first question is, why was that not possible? And then my second one, because Seth reminded me, I think things are moving in other areas. So Seth, if you could give us an update on what the next steps are for Clarendon Edgefield. So those are my two questions: transparency and next steps for Clarendon Edgefield.
So the reason that we wanted to do another meeting and not just allow this project to kind of carry over with a large gap into the new year, we wanted to do another meeting this year. Earlier, but we ran into significant problems with booking a venue that could accommodate a audience of our traditional sizes, as well as that was ADA compliant. And so it took us a while to kind of get to high school. And once we were able to book it, we had already committed to the date, and so we had to go with the 17th meeting, and the notices were already mailed out as well. And so we're tied to that meeting date. But moving forward, I will note that meetings around the holidays might not be the best idea. I will acknowledge that, Ms. Yolanda, so thank you for that feedback. And I'll let Seth answer the question with regards to Clarendon and Edgefield.
Yeah, so Yolanda, I'm sure you were at the meeting yesterday and you saw how some of the cases that our staff are dealing with in other areas are getting to be more complex. So just for that reason, we are under-resourced in terms of the staff time, especially around the holiday season. That's one of the reasons why we decided not to have schedule a meeting yet for the Clarendon Corridor. The process is still on. We just haven't decided on a follow-up meeting. I think that's going to be decided once staff come back from the holiday. But we are not able to accommodate additional meeting before Christmas because staff have family and they also travel.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was actually
So it's not like the project has stopped. No, we're going to schedule it 1 week once we come back.
Sure, I understand. I wasn't under the impression that there were going to be any more meetings, so I just wondered if you had an updated timeline.
No, we don't. We can't schedule anything. We have very difficult cases that the staff are dealing with, and some of them are requiring more of our time. And I'm sure you saw one of them. We have other cases that just like that.
Absolutely. Okay, thank y'all.
All right, thank you. All right. I would
Thank you
like
so
to
much.
thank everyone for coming out. I will conclude the meeting now. Please reach out to me if you have any additional questions. And hopefully you have a safe and happy holidays and a good rest of your day. Thank you.